Happy Monday, friends. Happy week of August 10th. It's going quick. It's been great. A great week. I am so thankful for those of you who watch this and listen to this. I've had some really great conversations about it, and this was never started out of the goal of to be an influencer, other than to influence you with the joy that Christ has given me and the things that I do and the passions that I have. And so, if anything, I do want to be an ambassador for the kingdom in that case. But truly, the conversations I get to have about this podcast fill me up more than they fill you. This is my passion, helping others about nutrition and health and motivation and just random life stuff. My passion is just helping people, serving people, and I've been given an array of just random, more like a collage, of just random hobbies and random things that I'm interested in and enjoy, and getting to pour that out into other people actually fills me up. So thank you. If you listen to this, if you've listened to all 38 episodes at this point, we're almost a year in, which is just crazy that I just started this just for the heck of it about last Thanksgiving. It was the end of last September, actually, and just how far it's come. Yeah, it's just really fun to look back and reflect on that. This week, I have had such a fulfilling week with so many conversations that I didn't get all of my research done for a couple of the episodes that are simmering on the back burner. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a shorter episode, a little bit of a more free-spirited episode that doesn't have a ton to do with heavy nutrition, heavy health, but obviously all of those things sort of have an undertone in what I do in my daily life and how I think about life, and so it always is there. But today I just want to give you 5 to 6 books that are changing my life. They didn't just change my life once. I am a person who, if they stay on my bookshelf, I'm going to go back to them. I am a marker upper, so these all have plenty of sticky tabs and plenty of highlights in them, and I return to them when I need a quote, when I need to remember that one thing that lit me up when I read it, and they're good books. Some of them are obvious ones. You've probably heard of them from multiple people. Some of them are Morgan specials, which mean these books just spoke to me, and I think that they haven't had the opportunity in the spotlight to speak to other people. So without further ado, the first book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. This book is crucial for every Christian, and it also is crucial for a person who is secularly trying to live life fulfilling. Ironically, if you read it, you might have some more questions about becoming a Christian and following Christ, and that's awesome. If not, it still has practical ways to make your secular life better. Because we all struggle with hurry and rushing in this world. And his big idea is that many of us are busy, and yet we're still wasting our life. Comer argues that hurry isn't just an unpleasant schedule problem. It can actually prevent us from becoming the kind of people we want to be. His answer isn't to just simply manage your time better. It's to change the pace and practices in your life so that you have room for God and people and the things and your own soul to prosper in what they do. Major points that he highlights are that hurry is different from being busy. You can have a full schedule and still not be living hurried lives. You can't become a patient, loving, peaceful person when you are constantly rushing. Being in a rush is different than being busy. Solitude, silence, Sabbath, and simplicity are 4 of the main S's that he talks about. These aren't luxuries. They are things that you can use to create space and actually pay attention to God and the people that you care about. Obviously, he touches on how technology and our phones are sucking away moments that we don't have, and the goal that he ultimately comes to is not to accomplish doing less just to do less. It's to do less so that you can make room for the things that matter more. That is his main argument. He convinces you, or I want to convince you to read it by telling you that every one of us thinks that we don't have enough time in the day. If you go back, I think it's like episode 8, I do the focus deficit episode where I talk about how our problem is not that we don't have enough time in a day. We have 24 hours. The problem is that we're not focusing on the things we really care about. We're selling our time to things that produce a minimum product of enjoyment and minimum amount of reward or actual gain in this world. Whereas we all know the things we aren't getting to in a day and that we like those things. So it's time to just reprioritize and make sure that we're actively giving time to those things that truly matter to others and to us. So Comer makes you ask a different question of like, rather than saying, why don't I have enough time? He asks, what is the way that I'm living and how is it keeping me from becoming the person I want to be? You should read this book when you're overwhelmed or overcommitted, constantly distracted, or you feel like life is just moving too fast and you can't keep up. I would especially recommend this book to people in their 20s to 30s who are just getting started. This book is good for everybody, but if you're picking it up when you're already kind of responsible for some of the busyness, I think it's harder. When you're in your 20s or 30s, we're sort of self-creating all the busyness. You're just getting started in marriage or kids or a job or other relationships. Responsibilities are just kind of picking up. And if you can master the ability not to be hurried in our busy lives, that is crucial right now. Also because life is only ever going to get busier. Unless you're getting to retirement where maybe it's slowing down, life is just going to keep getting busier. So I always think of this. If I can't get my sleep managed now as a 22-year-old who is only in charge of myself, I'm never going to get it. So in light of this book, it's teaching me that I have to start making time, not just trying to find time. Read this when you realize you're accomplishing a lot, but you still feel like you're not doing anything meaningful. This book is also my favorite color, and I am a book cover person. So number 1, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Number 2, this one you've probably never heard about, and if you have, please talk to me because everyone I mention it to has never heard of it, and they look at me like I don't know what I'm talking about. This is an old book, 1955, by Hannah Hurnard, Hind's Feet on Hind's Places. It is based it's all of an allegory, and Hind's Feet and Hind's Places is specifically from Habakkuk 3:19. The Lord God is my strength, and he will make my feet like Hind's feet. He will make me walk upon high places. That is the scripture it comes from. And it's a bit of you got to give it some time, but then once you give it some time, it starts you get really into it. It's some old language, and basically the big idea of this book is that sometimes God doesn't remove the difficult path. He just transforms you into a type of person who can walk with him through it, or the type of person who can walk into it. It's an allegorical Christian novel about a woman. Her name is Much Afraid, and her family are the Fears, and so they try to make her marry her cousin Craven Fear. She's surrounded by fear, insecurity, resentment, and limitations. She decides that she's going to follow a shepherd toward the high places, but the journey requires surrender, trust, pain, and transformation. So the core story and the themes, I don't want to spoil it, but I have to kind of convince you to read this one because nobody's picking up a book from 1955. The protagonist, again, is named Much Afraid. She is physically deformed and plagued by her fearing family. Again, her name is Much Afraid. Her family is the Fears. She's pressured to marry into the Fear family. Her resolution is that she calls out to the shepherd being Jesus, or Christ, obviously, but it never tells you that. You just know it from knowing the Bible and the shepherd. The shepherd comes and rescues her and shows her how to find transformation, healing, and divine love. This is one of those books that's going to change every time you read it. When I read it my sophomore year of college, which was 2 years ago, so I was 20, I was in a time of really battling with my insecurity and my eating disorder. It was kind of the peak moment of I was realizing I was doing it and it was wrong, but I couldn't quite change it yet. I hadn't quite crossed over that threshold. So I was caught in this conflict of like Much Afraid, I knew what needed to change, but I wasn't able to change it myself. And like her, you call out for that transformation and you surrender it. This book will teach you that the journey itself is the point, not the healing. The major points that Hannah Hurnard points out is that fear doesn't have to determine your future. God often leads us through things we'd never voluntarily choose. Surrender is not defeat. Sometimes giving something to God is how we become free. The things we desperately want to remove from our lives can sometimes become the things that God uses to transform us. You don't need to understand the entire journey. You need to take one step alongside with Him leading you. The shepherd isn't merely trying to take much afraid somewhere to the high places. He's making her into someone who can live there. If you read Habakkuk 3:19, it just says, 3:17 starts, and it says, "Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vine, the produce of the olive fall, and the fields yield no food. The flock be cut off from the field, and there be no bend in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God the Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like that of the deer. He makes me tread on high places." So, hinds feet on hinds places, it talks about a character who is much afraid, and he transforms her disabled feet, her crippled body, into, like a deer, to transform her to not only lead her to the high places, but make her someone capable of going with him there. It's a beautiful story of the crippled protagonist as she leaves. Her town is called the Valley of Humiliation or something, and she gets to leave the Valley of Humiliation to travel to the high places, accompanied by the shepherd, and then along the way he gives her two friends to travel with her, and her two friends are called Sorrow and Suffering, and by the end they get transformed into peace and joy. So if that made no sense to you, that's okay. But I hope I've intrigued you to read that one, because again, it changes every time you read it. When I read it, as I was going through my eating disorder, I saw it as surrendering that and being transformed into something new, but not leaving that part of me behind, taking it with me and having it be a positive thing. If you read it when you're 30 or when you're going through a heartbreak, it'll say something different to you. So it's one of those books that will change every time you read it. You should read Hinds Feet on Hinds Places when you're afraid, you're disappointed, you're grieving a dream, you're waiting for something, or you're walking through something that you just wish would end. I'd especially recommend it during major transitions in your life. So college, marriage, ready to have a career change, somebody dies in your family, whatever it be, it's for those harder moments. Read this when you don't understand why God is taking you through the hard way rather than the easy way. And you'll gain some clarity, or you'll just feel comforted knowing that there's a whole book about how you feel. All right, number 3, what I talk about when I talk about running. Now, this is obviously about running, but it's also not. It is for everyone. You can see this one is perhaps one of my favorite books ever. There are so many stickies in it. I quote it all the time. It is by Haruki Murakami, who I believe he writes a lot of fiction outside of this book, but this is actually his memoir about his life. If you don't want to read the book, the Founders podcast does a great episode where he breaks down the book. So you can also look that up on Spotify or Apple. The big idea of this book is that a meaningful life is often built through quiet, repetitive discipline rather than dramatic moments. This is technically a book about running, but you don't have to be a runner to love it. Murakami uses running as a lens through which he explores writing, aging, solitude, discipline, pain, failure, and what it means to just keep going. Readers often describe it as being less about running itself and more about an intimate reflection on how he lives. So, Haruki Murakami is a writer. That is his job. But running is something he did every day. And late in his life, when he's writing this memoir, he's able to connect the two in a really beautiful way. And because he's a writer, he can poetically describe running to you. So as a runner, it's so fun to read it and be like, that is what I feel every morning when I hit the pavement. Even if you're not a runner, you can take out the running word and insert whatever your thing is. If it's lifting, if it's going on long walks, if it's painting. He is just an artist who is using running to help describe his art. His major point is that consistency matters more than intensity. And especially in endurance, consistency is far more important than intensity. You learn a lot about yourself when you do the same thing repeatedly. Pain and discomfort are a part of growth, but suffering isn't necessarily the same thing as pain, especially when you're choosing the suffering, which is what he touches on. When we are choosing to go for a run, it's not really suffering because you chose it. And pain is often, I would say pain is something we don't choose. Suffering is something we often choose because it's a mindset. Pain is a literal physical feeling. But that's besides the point. You don't have to be the best. You need to be willing to keep showing up. He argues that solitude can be healthy when intentionally chosen. Your body, this is my favorite part of this book, is he argues that your body and your mind aren't separate. Caring for one affects the other. And that's so true. I said this a couple weeks ago to some friends, but when our bodies are failing, that's often the times where we feel the most spiritually broken as well. So the hint there is that when you start getting sick, when you start getting exhausted and run down, dive deeper into Jesus and his presence in your life, because when our physical ailments start to arise, those are the times where we start to feel spiritually distant. And those should be the moments where we're the most spiritually dialed in, because we can't do anything else physically. We might as well be spiritually dialed. So your body and your mind are not separate. There is something deeply satisfying about pursuing a goal that doesn't necessarily produce an external reward. Endurance is not a medal at the end of a race. Endurance is a lifelong skill. I sign up for races, but the racing is not my fun thing. I actually have supreme race anxiety, and I am just much happier to just run every day, never race. And that's because it's something I consistently can do, and it's not even a thought in my mind every day. Why you should read this book is that one of the most interesting aspects is the connection between his running and his writing. Both require him to sit down or put on some shoes, but do the work regardless of whether he feels inspired. He talks about this a lot. Those days when you don't want to go on a run, but you do it anyway. Those days when you don't want to go to work, but you have to do it anyway. That is the beauty. Connecting his art to his craft is saying that some days you don't want to do it, but you do it anyway, and that just it removes the need and the reliance on motivation, and motivation will not always be there. So being able to do the work whether you feel inspired or not is a highlight of this book. You should read this book because it makes you rethink what it means to be successful. Murakami is never asking, how do I become extraordinary? He's asking, can I become the person who shows up every day, who's just consistently good, maybe occasionally great, to quote my favorite running coach, but just consistently good, not striving to be consistently great, because that'll lead to burnout. Read it when you're trying to build discipline, starting something difficult, you're trying to find some motivation again, and it's not working. This is especially good for someone entering a new stage of life. If you're entering something that's starting to feel mundane, like training for a marathon, like doing a job every day, those mundane things, this will hopefully redirect you to think about them more poetically, or find something that you can think about poetically and love as a passion. Read this when you need to remember that a meaningful life is built one ordinary day at a time, not just on the high days. The fourth one I don't have because I gave my copy away to somebody, but it is Atomic Habits. This is one I use every day in trying to build my day. Habit stacking is a big part of my daily routine. It's also a book that it's on like every top 10 reading list you ever need to read ever. James Clear he has a brilliant way of making it so simple and just saying what we all already know, but making it more digestible. So his big thing is that your habits can only be habits if they're really, they're a part of who you are. So he talks about relying on your systems, not your habits. Becoming the thing you want to be, identifying as a habit, not just saying it's a habit. So that's like saying, I am a runner, not I want to run every day. I am a person who eats healthy, not just somebody who wants to be healthier. The big idea is that your life is largely the result of what you repeatedly do, not occasionally intend to do. Clear's framework is extremely practical. Small improvements compound, and the goal is to build systems that make good behaviors easier and bad behaviors harder. His core framework is the 4 behavioral changes. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. If you can master those 4 things, odds are it'll become a habit, it'll become a lifestyle for you. Small changes compound. Don't focus on goals, build systems. Your habits reinforce your identity. Your environment matters more than willpower. And getting back on track matters more than perfection. There is often a long period. This was partly my favorite part of the book, is that there's often a long period where you're improving without seeing results. Don't quit during that plateau. I think in fitness we see that a lot. When you're first starting that body recomp, if you're doing it the healthy way, you're not going to see results right away. The muscle is going to build and the fat's going to burn, but it's not going to happen like that. It's going to be like you're going to burn a little bit of fat, you're going to put on a little bit of muscle, maybe put on a little bit of fat because you're getting that muscle up, and then maybe you'll burn a little bit more fat. It'll go down, but it won't happen fast. I was talking to this guy the other day. He's down 100 pounds, and he's taken almost 2 years to do it. And that's a healthy way to do it, and he looks so much better now, but I can't imagine how aggravating the last 2 years have been after he made the decision to try to lose weight, and it's taken this long. But that's the beauty of this life, is that we've got time to accomplish our goals, but in order to actually accomplish them, sometimes you have to deal with those long plateaus where nothing's really changing, but stay consistent, stay attached to the system, like James Clear says. James Clear takes something that is really vague, like I need to get my life together, and he turns it into concrete questions, like what should I do today? What environment have I created? What kind of person are those actions turning me into? I think everybody should read this book when they're entering college, and then if you're starting a business or you're trying to get your life back together after feeling like you're kind of going off the rails, this book is for you. I do think everybody in their late teens should read this book because it'll really help you as you head into where you're first responsible for building your own habits. As kids, we sort of become a result of our parents' habits, but as adults, we get to build our own. And as becoming a result of your parents' habits, that brings me to one of the honorable mentions. So this is like book number 4B. I just finished this one, and it's so hilarious that I read it. I think I talked about it at one point, but it is Habits of the Household by Justin Earley. This is a book about parenting, and I am not a parent, but I am a household of 1, and so my household of 1 runs much more efficiently after reading this book. And I will reread it when I become a family and more than a household of 1. But this book by Justin Earley talks about how it takes kind of the atomic habits approach, but adds in liturgy, which is just saying like everything is worship. Every habit is worship. All that we do in this world is worship to God. And so he talks about how your habits they do shape your household. And if you want them to be great, you should basically ground them all in liturgy and making them all worshipful. He talks about, the book is really beautifully structured where he talks about the main topics in a family, or the main times in a family. The first one is waking, and then he talks about meal times, how you discipline, how you deal with screen time, work, play, conversation, how you deal with your marriage apart from just the family parenting part, the devotion, and then bedtimes. And so he structures it kind of as how you would walk through a day, starting with waking up, ending with bedtimes. He is arguing that your family is being formed by your ordinary routines, whether you intentionally are choosing it, or he says whether you are discipling through your habits of a household or not. And it argues that these seemingly mundane patterns of waking up, of meal times, of letting your kids stare at a screen, they are shaping the people that your family becomes. So the same way that your habits should shape who you become, your habits, if you're the leader of a house, are also shaping who those you're leading are becoming. The major points are that your kids learn from what your family repeatedly does. The ordinary is spiritually significant. Parenting isn't just about teaching values, it's about creating rhythms that embody those values. If you're parenting yourself, as I am, it's not about teaching yourself values. It's about creating the rhythms that make you embody that value. The habits of a person become the environment for their children. Family discipleship doesn't have to mean adding another giant activity or creating a calendar on the wall to track everybody's progress. It does mean that small rituals can create enormous meaning over time. You should read this when you're preparing for marriage, newly married, expecting children, raising young kids, or as a 22-year-old on your own, trying to just know random stuff, I guess. This is probably a book on the list that is the most applicable to just one time period, but I truly benefit from reading this book now in my life. One of my favorite things that he talks about is just simply that he got up every morning at 5 a.m. to sit by the window, drink coffee, and read his Bible. And his kids would come down screaming in the stairs. They were supposed to still be in bed. And he, at first, would yell at his kids, punish his kids, tell them to go back and lay in their bed. And then eventually he realized they should just sit there. And if they want to be loud while he's reading his Bible, they can be loud. Worship doesn't have to be structured and clean and beautiful. But as he was reading his Bible by the window with a beautiful cup of coffee, he realized that his kids were learning. And then by the time one of his kids became like 8 years old, the kid asked if he could get up at 5 a.m. to read his Bible with dad. And that is the beauty. That is the beauty of these liturgies in your life, is that you don't have to force a kid to do a habit. You don't have to give them a gold star on a chart on the wall. If you just do them and truly enjoy them, your habits as a parent, as a sibling, as a spouse, your habits become the environment that affects that other person. And like James Clear says, our environment shapes our habits. And so if you having a habit creates an environment that is positive and worshipful to God, the environment that your person, your dependent, your other person that you're living with, your co-inhabitant, whatever it be, they are then living in that habitat with you. They are being influenced by your environment. And hopefully, if you're following what he talks about in his book, Habits of the Household, that your habits are worshipful and that they are constantly existing in an environment that helps them worship more. That is what John Early's book, Habits of the Household, covers. Book 5. This is a massive book, but it is because it is all 8, maybe 7, of C.S. Lewis's classics in one book. It's crazy. I've not read them all. I've read a couple of them. It's basically 8 books in one, but you can just buy the one book that I'm going to talk about. Mere Christianity is my favorite book ever. Like Haruki Murakami, C.S. Lewis has a beautiful way of painting a picture with words and telling you, making these abstract things of religion so concrete in a poetic way. Obviously, his quote hangs on my wall behind me. He is one of my favorite writers ever. If I could meet C.S. Lewis and Reba, I would be a happy girl. But his book, The Great Divorce, it sort of goes along the lines of the same theme of Hind's Feet and Hind's Places. The Great Divorce is deceptively named. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but it is, you might hear that and think it's a little weird. But it is telling you that sometimes we don't actually want heaven as much as we think we do. We want heaven without having to give up the things the world offers us. The structure of this book is that it's basically like a parable, much like the parable of the rich man who comes to Jesus and says, I'm ready to follow you. What do I have to do? And Jesus says, take up your cross, follow me. Don't go back home, come with me. And the man immediately goes, but I gotta go take care of my dad and my mom, and then I'll follow you. And Jesus says, unless you drop everything right now and follow me, this isn't gonna work. And that's kind of the picture that C.S. Lewis is gonna paint over and over and over again through different protagonists, antagonists, whatever they be. This is probably the most philosophically challenging book on this list. C.S. Lewis is a heavy writer, so you gotta be locked in. If you're not a reader, it helps to listen to him. They'll read it in a fun British accent. Lewis imagines a group of people traveling from hell to heaven. So there's some people that argue the purgatory part of this book, and that's why they won't read it. If that's you, that's fine, but you can get over that fact too and read it anyway because it's still a great book. Lewis imagines a group of people traveling from hell to heaven. Through encounters with different characters, he explores free will, pride, selfishness, love, repentance, and what keeps people from choosing God. Hell isn't just about punishment. Lewis explores how people can choose isolation from God. We can become attached to our sins, our grievances, identities, and excuses. Sometimes we protect the very things making us miserable. That's a big one that I realized when learning this book. Sometimes, like we read all the scripture that says God is going to prune us. And sometimes it's like we're holding on so closely to those thorns, knowing full well they are holding our hands and cutting our hands with the rashes and the grossness that they are. But we won't just let go of the things that are making us miserable and making us complain. Pride can disguise itself as a virtue. Love sometimes requires surrender rather than indulgence. God's grace doesn't eliminate our responsibility to choose. God's grace does not eliminate our responsibility to choose what's good for us. Heaven requires becoming the kind of person who actually wants heaven. And I think that's hard. I thought I had it all in lockdown, and then I read this book. And as you read this book, it's so funny because you'll read each story and you'll start like thinking like, what is this person doing? Like they're painting the narrative of these people traveling to the high place. They're getting led to essentially heaven, and people are still clinging to the things of this world. And as you read it, you're thinking, yeah, okay, I'm just ready for heaven. I'm ready to go. But you read it and you start to go, that's me. And oh, I'm clinging to some of that pride and the things that I love in this world, worried that they're not going to come with me. And so it'll really, really boggle your brain in that way. He challenges the idea that people will just choose happiness when it's offered to them. Because oftentimes, people are still not choosing it. They're choosing the misery. They're choosing the struggle. And this is something that I struggle with. I like misery a little bit. That sounds so bad to say out loud. But I do. I like things that are hard and gross. And if you tell me something is hard and gross, odds are I'm going to choose to do it. That brings me joy, doing the things that gross other people out. And I really had to reflect on that while reading this book. I would convince you to read this because it makes those abstract Christian ideas feel more solid and more tangible. Instead of reading a theological argument about pride, Lewis lets you watch a person cling desperately to it. Instead of explaining to you what surrender means, he shows you someone being asked to let go and that of something that they've built their entire identity around. And that's why this book can be uncomfortable. You start out analyzing the characters and eventually realize, wait, that's me. You should read this book, The Great Divorce, when you're wrestling with faith, doubt, pride, forgiveness, resentment, love, literally anything, or what it actually means to surrender your life in anticipation of being with God again. I'd particularly recommend it to people in every stage of life, but especially when you're developing that worldview and realizing that being a good person isn't really the whole point of being a Christian. As you're starting to wrestle with the idea of like, there's something more to this book will help walk you through that. Read this when you're ready for a book that doesn't ask you what you believe in God. It asks you whether you really want him or not. That's the power of this book. The last honorable mention, because that was 5. So you got the 5, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, Atomic Habits, Haruki Murakami's What I Talk About When I Talk About Running, Hind's Feet and Hind's Places, and C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce, sub in Habits of the Household as well. The other honorable mention, this is the easiest read ever. I think it took me like 15 minutes. It is John Gordon's The Coffee Bean. John Gordon writes a lot of books that are super easy to read because they're written in little parable stories to teach you like business lessons, leadership lessons, faith lessons. He's got so many good ones that are just simple and down the point, and they're named some really interesting things. There's The Carpenter, The Garden, and then The Coffee Bean is this one. The coffee bean is the idea that you may not be able to control your environment, but you can control what you allow your environment to turn you into. This parable, the coffee bean, is structured around the lesson that there are 3 things you can be in a boiling pot of water. You can be a carrot, you can be an egg, and you can be a coffee bean. A carrot gets soft, an egg gets hard, and a coffee bean transforms the water into the most beautiful beverage on planet Earth, coffee. The major points are that difficult environments are going to come. You can respond to adversity instead of just simply reacting to it. A carrot reacts and gets soft, they break. An egg reacts and gets hard, they shut down. A coffee bean reacts and it transforms the environment to something positive. Your character determines how you influence the environment around you. Don't allow negativity to define you or change your state. Resilience is about becoming someone who can bring something positive into different situations. You have more influence than you realize. You should read this book when you're entering a difficult environment, a new school, a new job, leadership, conflict, or you're in a major change. Like if your workplace is going through some really hard drama, this is the time to read this book. Read this when you're entering a difficult season where you're not allowed to change your circumstances, so you better just change the atmosphere as being that positive change. So, of those books, we got Atomic Habits, which will teach you how to build a life before your life builds you. What I talk about when I talk about running will show you how to learn discipline, endurance, and how to keep showing up every ordinary day. The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry will help you learn that a full life isn't necessarily a busy one. Hind's Feet on Hind's Places will learn to teach you to trust God when the path doesn't make sense or it hurts a little bit. The Great Divorce will help you examine what you actually believe and what you're holding on to and whether you actually want God or not. Habits of the Household will help you build your family's culture and habits intentionally. And the Coffee Bean will help you decide what kind of person you become when times get tough. And if I had to make an argument for the whole list, all of these books work surprisingly well together because all truth is God's truth. Atomic Habits asks, what are you repeatedly doing? Murakami asks, can you keep doing when it's hard and nobody is watching? Ruthless Elimination of Hurry asks, are you going so fast that you're missing your actual life? Hind's Feet asks, can you trust God when the path hurts? The Great Divorce asks, what are you willing to surrender? Habits of the Household asks, what are your daily rhythms impacting on other people? And the Coffee Bean asks, who are you going to become when those difficult times happen? And that's probably the strongest way I pitched this whole collection. These aren't really books about productivity, running, parenting, or theology. They're books about becoming a person that does the things that you want to do. They each attacked a different version of this same question. What kind of person am I becoming? And am I becoming that person intentionally, or is that person just becoming of me from my habits and my environment? And I had to take a class in Bible college, and it was all about the wisdom books of the Bible. So Job, Psalm, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. And each of these wisdom books have wisdom that pops up in other places. And this class made me write a horrible 1 to 2 page paper every week. It was actually good for me, but about justifying one of these lessons in another religion or another culture's historical documents. And so, like, a lot of the Proverbs show up in ancient Babylonian text. A lot of Ecclesiastes has similar stories written in all the other religions. And so I would have to take this text from another religion and compare and contrast it with the OG text that is the Bible. And the beautiful thing is that all wisdom, when Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, that truth is the one truth. And so all of these other religions, think Buddha in the forest meditating and wanting enlightenment. The Muslims believe in their leader who was extremely wise. Those men who, quote unquote, meditated and wanted wisdom, if they were actually seeking out truth, there is one truth, which means that they found the same truth that we found. They just aren't calling it the right thing. And I love that perspective because it gives us light into how we can bring every tribe, tongue, and nation to the same common ground that Jesus is our Savior. Besides that point, all of these books, secular or not, they have truth that comes from the ultimate truth, the Word, the Bible. The ruthless elimination of hurry reminds me of Mary and Martha in Luke 10. This is the perfect biblical pairing where Martha isn't doing anything bad. She's serving Jesus. She's running around, cooking dinner, cleaning house. And Mary, her sister, is just sitting at the feet of Jesus doing nothing. And Martha gets so mad. She's like, Mary, why are you not helping me cook and clean? And Jesus humbles her and says, Mary's not missing this. She's with me right now. Join us. And that's the beauty. Martha was hurrying. She was rushing. She was stressing rather than just enjoying what she was actually working for, which was just time with Jesus. That's exactly what Comer is pushing you to ask. He's not asking, am I doing good things? He's wanting you to ask, am I so busy doing good things that I've stopped being present with God and the people in front of me? The story gives a tangible picture of activity and attentiveness combined in a beautiful way. You can be busy serving people, serving God, and still be too distracted to be actually with them. Hinds feet and hinds places is from Habakkuk 3:19. And this biblical wisdom is not only the namesake, but it's also a perfect connection. When Habakkuk says, as we read, the fig tree isn't budding, there are no grapes, the olive crop fails, the field produces no fruit, there are no sheep in the pens, there are no cattle in the stalls. In other words, everything has gone to crap. Habakkuk 3:17 is saying, we got nothing. Nothing's going well. But then it says, I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. And then that the Lord is my strength. Not I got it figured out. Not I'm going to fix this. The Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. And he causes me to tread on high places. It's basically the entire message of hinds feet and hinds places. The high places aren't necessarily about life becoming easy. It's about learning to walk securely with God in those difficult places. What I talk about when I talk about running is there's a ton of Bible verses over endurance. John loves to talk about endurance. Hebrews 12 especially. It's almost too obvious. It just says, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Murakami talks about running as a metaphor for life. You develop endurance by showing up, continuing to do the work, enduring the discomfort, and continuing when the excitement wears off. Hebrews says the same thing about Jesus. You don't sprint the Christian life, you run with endurance. And Hebrews adds something that Murakami can't. You need something worth looking toward, fixing your eyes on Jesus. That's the difference between simply enduring and enduring with peace. You won't always feel motivated. Faithfulness means continuing to run away and remembering what you're running towards. Atomic habits. This reminds me of Daniel 1. I think Daniel is better at pairing to atomic habits than any of the proverbs about habits would be. Daniel doesn't suddenly become courageous in chapter 6 when he's thrown in the lion's den. He's already been practicing faithfulness for years. In Daniel 1, he was a young man in a completely different culture. He makes a seemingly small decision about what he will and won't consume. One of my favorite chapters in the Bible, it says David ate vegetables and water, and the king's men were like, yo, that's dumb. The king is giving you a whole feast. Eat the fatty, rich food. And David says, I'm good. I'll eat my vegetables and I'll drink my water. And he was stronger and healthier than any of the king's knights. And so those habits helped build the Daniel that in Daniel 6 can then endure the lion's den. Daniel prayed, he sought wisdom, he refused to compromise, and he consistently chose faithfulness. And eventually, when that big test came, Daniel already knew what he was going to do. I think of habits and atomic habits as playing Jenga rather than just a pyramid. So if you're building a pyramid of habits, like sort of going layer by layer by layer, sometimes when you pull out that pyramid, the pyramid collapses, or like a deck of cards. That pyramid collapses when you touch it at all. So when that one tiny bad thing happens, your whole life falls apart. If you play Jenga, where you strategize how you align your habits and how you stack them on a perfect day, when that imperfect day comes, you don't come crashing down. You just might have a little bit of a tilt, and you might have to do a little bit of rebuilding, but the life doesn't come crashing down. Character isn't built on one heroic moment. It's built through thousands of ordinary choices and habits that you make every day. The Great Divorce. Again, I kind of alluded to this. Luke 18 talks about the rich young ruler. The rich young ruler comes up to Jesus and says, I've done all the right things. What am I missing? And Jesus says that he can't let go of it. He can't let go of his life, of his family. And the man walks away. That's the heart of the Great Divorce. Lewis explores the terrifying possibility that we can want the benefits of God without actually wanting God enough to surrender ourselves to him. The question becomes, what would I refuse to give up if Jesus asked me to do it? And that's much harder than asking, do I believe in God? Because you believe something intellectually doesn't mean that you aren't still clinging to something that is more important to you. The things we refuse to surrender can become the things that keep us from experiencing the life that God is offering us. There's one of the characters in here, who is an artist, and he gets to this heaven and he's getting led to the high places, and he's a creative person on earth. And as he gets up there, he's like, man, I'm going to paint a picture of this place. I'm going to start selling it. Like, other people need to see this. And his guide says, no, you're just here. Like, you don't need the picture to remember this place. Just be here. And this artist couldn't wrap his head around the idea that he was just done painting beautiful pictures because he had seen the most beautiful place. And he turns back because he's like, if this is no longer my craft, who am I? And I was really perplexed by that guy because I am a creative person. And here on earth, I love to take pictures and make beautiful things. And I think about when I get to heaven one day, am I still going to have that entrepreneurial side of me that doesn't want to let go of the marketing, of the creating when I'm with the creator? And so it helps you wrestle through some of that. Makes you think. Habits of the household is much like the laws in Deuteronomy. This is probably the most direct connection. God tells Israel to talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, and when you lie down and when you get up. He tells Israel in the lawmaking era of the Bible that they should never stop speaking the law of the Lord. And in fact, when they stop speaking the law of the Lord, we see some big issues in Judges when that law gets kind of lost there for an era. And so he's basically telling us that faith isn't supposed to be only at church, only at Bible study, only at youth group. Your faith should show up at breakfast, at driving in the car to school, at dinner, at movie night, at bedtime, in conflict, in your chores, when you're mowing the lawn, on your ordinary Tuesdays, when your toddler tips over his spaghetti. That's when your faith shows up. That's where everything is liturgy. The household itself becomes a place where children learn what faith looks like, not just what it should look like. Again, I've said this, all of these books ask you the question, ultimately, who are you becoming? Or what are you doing that is making you a person who is not becoming who you want to be? Each book answers a different part of that question. Your habits, your pace, your perseverance, your response to suffering, your willingness to surrender, your family rhythms, your response to environment, all of those lay stones in who you are building as a person. And if you are responsible for other people, all of these books talk about how you can aid in the structure of those people that you are responsible for helping build. Ultimately, all truth is God's truth, and no self-help book isn't going to tell you something that you couldn't find in Ecclesiastes or in Proverbs or Job or in the New Testament or in the Old Testament. It's all true, and it's all coming from the one source. So, those are some books that I think you should read. If you would like my copy, you just have to read through all my sticky notes because I don't want them taken out of my books. But, all that to be said, that's just a little bit of a fun, lighthearted episode for this week. If you have any book recommendations for me, I would love them. Again, I'm a big reader. Trying to get into some fiction has not gone well yet because I like to read things that make me contemplate everything in my life. But with that, I'll be back next week with some more regular scheduled programming of science and nutrition and health. Until then, starve the lies, build your body, fortify your mind, stay